Fascinating closing arguments today, and joining me from Phoenix, Arizona, outside the courthouse, in session correspondent Beth Karras from our sister network, True TV. Also with us, criminal defense attorney Brian Claypool. Great to see you both. Beth, let me begin with you. Interesting the way the defense termed this whole thing and pointed the finger directly at Elizabeth Johnson during that closing argument.
That's right, and that it was Elizabeth Johnson who manipulated not just Tammy Smith, but also Logan McQuarrie, that they were both victims here. Now, it was a much shorter closing argument by Ann Phillips for the defense, but nonetheless still powerful. She said things like, was Tammy Smith really acting like someone who had something to hide? Really? Was she being a criminal, inviting the police in to search her home, not caring if her phones were tapped? Look at all the things the police did in their investigation to try to uncover evidence of a conspiracy when there really was none. And then she reminded the jurors under Arizona law, Logan McQuarrie had no enforceable rights to that baby until December 17th, when there was a paternity and custody order. Anything before that couldn't possibly be interfering with his rights. That's, basically the essence of their argument regarding the conspiracy, besides the fact there was no agreement for her to go out of state. Elizabeth Johnson left on her own out of state, and Tammy Smith just wanted that baby to come back.
Brian Claypool, do you think that the jury is going to buy that Tammy Smith is a victim here?
Well, I'm not sure the jury's going to buy that she's a victim, but if they do the right thing, I don't think they're going to buy also that she committed a conspiracy to interfere with the custody of baby Gabriel. I think that the key fact in this case that I didn't really hear either lawyer really talk about is evidence of an agreement. In order to proving conspiracy is hard because you have to prove an underlying agreement and the actual crime of interfering with custodial relationships. And I don't see any bona fide evidence of an agreement between Tammy Smith and Elizabeth Johnson. There's no email, text message, voicemail. So I think the prosecution has an uphill battle on that.
Beth Karras, what did the prosecutor say about any alleged agreement between Tammy Smith and Elizabeth Johnson?
Well, the jury was already instructed that for an agreement, you don't have to have like a sit-down, handshaking, whatever. You don't have to have evidence of that, an express agreement. Conduct can imply an agreement. Nonetheless, the prosecutor said that we didn't hear the conversation. There were conversations between Tammy Smith and Elizabeth Johnson that we didn't hear. So basically, it must have been in those conversations that were never recorded. We don't know about where they talked about an agreement. She basically agreed that there isn't hard evidence of an agreement.
All right, deliberations have begun out in Phoenix, Arizona. The jury now considering the fate of Tammy Smith, the woman caught in the middle of the disappearance of baby Gabriel. We've got more to talk about right here on Prime News.
So we were like running out the door with the one, right? And I've got the baby in the diaper bag and my purse, making chili. We were watching, I believe it was the New Orleans Saints, which is, I'm partly from New Orleans and that's where my kids are from. Or no, we started to go down and the lady's like, you need, because I think she gave her the other paperwork back or something. Finally, it was in, I think, Detective Ramirez's office or something, or down in her basement or whatever. They had already locked the doors that I was in, so I was locked in there with them, making the copies. So they already locked their doors. They close at 5. So they locked those doors, like I said, when I went to the one with all the books. And I also saw the price on it.
That's not a question.
Okay.
Answer the question in front of you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Classic Tammy Smith, even giving an answer when a question hasn't been asked. I mean, that's who she is. Anyhow, the jury is now deliberating. Closing arguments are done. Brian Claypool, criminal defense attorney, how much of these deliberations will be about, because it's rare that a criminal defendant testifies, how much will be about this jury figuring out whether or not they like and trust Tammy Smith versus the rest of the evidence?
I think it's going to be a huge factor in the jury's deliberation. Most of the time, a defendant does not testify in a criminal trial. And here you have Tammy Smith, who presents very well. She dresses well, she's articulate, she's rather charming, and I think a jury can come away from that and say, hey, look, I can't see this woman aligning herself with the likes of an Elizabeth Johnson, who if flat out is a lunatic and she's deranged. I don't see a jury putting those two together and saying, hey, they came up with this agreement to deprive Mr. McQuarrie of this child. I don't see it happening. And I think the fact she testified really helped her chances of prevailing in the case.
Beth Karras, how was Tammy Smith today? Did she appear nervous? Did she appear confident?
No, I think that she appeared nervous. I mean, in my opinion, and she was kind of, twisting and playing with her fingers, at the end. And she raced out of the courtroom when we broke for lunch, but it wasn't because she was emotional. She had to rush to the bathroom. But she was, she won't talk to me on advice of her lawyers. I mean, I should say hello to her and stuff, but she just seemed uptight today, and who can blame her?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot on the line for Tammy Smith, criminal conviction, potential time behind bars. Ultimately, she wants to clear her name. So, Brian, in this case, you've got an obvious villain, right? Elizabeth Johnson. But you've got a baby who's still missing, and that question hasn't been answered. Do you think the jury, even those aren't necessarily the charges in this case, are going to wonder about and debate what happened to baby Gabe?
Well, I think that's a good point. And if I was the lawyer for Tammy Smith, I would have said in closing argument that this whole trial was simply a tool to try to generate some information regarding the whereabouts of baby Gabriel. And I would have gone so far as to say, look, you want to get to the bottom where this poor little baby boy is, then I think you need to add a charge onto Elizabeth Johnson for murder in September. She's coming up for trial. Add that charge on to her case, and I'll bet you'll get to the bottom of this, because she then will have an impetus to want to come forward and tell us really what happened, because she knows what happened to that child.
Brian Claypool, thanks so much. Beth Karras, you hear anything from inside the courtroom, let us know.